Good morning, bonjour, guten morgen, buongiorno, buenos dias. I hope you managed to get some coffee during the break, although if you didn't, this riveting session will keep you awake, I'm sure, and on the edge of your seat. My name is Clem. I am the Publisher and Platform Development Manager at IAS for Northern Europe. This morning, we've covered a lot so far, and in this session, we'll be having a fireside chat with Louise Crosby from NewsUK to talk through how news have fared during the pandemic, the changes they've made, what went well, maybe what hasn't, and where they are placing their bets going into 2021. So now I will pass over to Lou, who will do a much better job at introducing herself than what I can. Over to you, Lou.
Oh, hi everyone. So as Clem said, my name is Louise Crosby. I'm Strategic Development Director at NewsUK. Shame that we're doing this remotely. It would be nice to see you all in person, but here we go. And I've been admiring Clem's wonderful bookcase in the background.
That I have not read a book from, but that's all right. Okay, fantastic. So I guess, Lou, the first question, how have news handled the pandemic? How have things played out for you? Can you talk us through a little bit about what this year has been like so far?
Yes, of course. So obviously, as a publisher of The Sun and The Times, we covered a lot of content around the pandemic, because what we really saw during that time is people were really turning to trusted news sources for information. So we saw a huge growth in traffic on the website, the Sun website, as people were coming onto the site more. And we also saw a rise in subscriptions for the Times, which was great. So it really impacted us in terms of, we experienced a lot of audience growth. But from an advertising perspective, I suppose we were really impacted in two ways, as I imagine like a lot of other publishers were as well. So firstly, we saw some advertisers or some brands in certain categories either reduce their spend or withdraw from the market for to a certain extent. So categories such as leisure, travel, hospitality, all of those key industry categories that were really impacted. The second way that we were impacted as well is obviously, as I said earlier, we're covering a lot of content around the pandemic, but we did experience, certain brands were a bit nervous about advertising around that type of content, unsure whether it was brand safe. And I remember reading an article on DigiDay around that time that said that they conducted some research that showed that 40% of brands said they wouldn't advertise around coronavirus content. This primarily impacted us at NewsUK around the OMP. But I suppose in terms of how we overcame some of those challenges is we really looked at how we could categorise and segment our content. So we looked at how we put those into three segments that looked at really the sentiment of the articles as opposed to looking at specific keywords. So we set up three segments, which were inclusion, neutral inclusion, and exclusion. So neutral inclusion, what that meant is it covered any content that had a positive or a neutral sentiment. So this could be anything around like baking in lockdown. Obviously, everyone went mad for banana bread, didn't they? Or it could be around education, or it could be like support around the NHS. So this is an example of how we overcame that. So yeah, so really impacted in two ways.
Yeah, okay, that sounds fantastic. So I mean, it's been a tough year by everything that's been going on, but I guess you could sort of summarise that working with your advertisers, you've been able to, I guess, come through a lot stronger than what you would have been.
Yes. So, like I said, I mean, it's just a case of like education around like brand safety. And, of course, as a news publisher, we're going to cover a lot of content. So it's just making brands feel assured that we're controlling where their ads are appearing, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess talking through this year in a little bit more detail, then, what's surprised you about how we've all reacted this year?
I think what's really surprised me the most is how our working culture and practices have just quickly adapted to like what's really just become like our new normal. I mean, personally, I've always been a big advocate of flexible working. As a mom to two young boys, I'm someone who works flexibly anyway. But I think I really believe in that people should personally believe in that people should be managed on and viewed on what they're delivering, not necessarily time spent in the office. But what surprised me about it is how quickly it all became the new normal about us all working flexibly, and working from home. And it's impacted people in a lot of positive ways. That's not to say that it's been without its challenges, because if you've got you've got like a team like working remotely, how do you create that team environment? How do you ensure that people aren't feeling isolated? So it's not all totally plain sailing, but I think it's just surprised me how quickly we've all adjusted so quickly to what's become like our new working practices. In terms of in client contact and how we're dealing with that, I think to a certain degree it's made us a bit more accessible sometimes to clients. Obviously, clearly not face to face, but remotely, because it's so easy to put a meeting in the diary, over Zoom, over Google Hangout, as opposed to traveling to a meeting. So to a certain degree, it's also increased our face time with clients. So we've as a result of it, has seen a positive impact on our work.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess so that's more the good ways that you've really adapted. But I mean, talking about some of the challenges that you really did face throughout, I guess, the first half of this year and up till now, are you able to talk through a little bit more about how you've really overcome them and what they are?
Yeah, of course. I mean, going back to what I said earlier, I think I suppose it's not necessarily a challenge as such, but it's the acceleration of our digital strategy in line with our digital audience growth. As our digital audiences have grown so quickly, as we've had, as I said earlier, we've had more people turning to trusted news sources for their information. We've had to accelerate our strategic thinking in terms of, well, how do we launch new products to this to this new accelerated market. So we've had to adapt. We've had to adapt to those changing audience behaviours in terms of how people are consuming content. I think one thing that we really noticed, everyone really noticed as well during the pandemic, is that people aren't getting to the shops. So we saw a significant rise in online shopping. We saw personally our e-commerce revenues really increase during that period. But also because of that trend, we were, well, how can we engage with that audience? From a commercial perspective, from an advertising perspective. And two of the key trends that we saw during that period are online shopping and unboxing, when people are just unboxing things and showing what they showing an audience what they've bought. So we launched a new product called Shop with Style, where we use our style editorial team. They work with a brand, they pick the products that they want, the products arrive, they talk about them, and it's all done over this format that we're talking on now, and that's proven to be really popular. And I think it's just in terms of how, not so much a challenge, but how it's almost your challenge is how do you adapt quickly to changes in audience behaviours, and that's always been key for us.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, especially coming into Q4 as well, where gifting is such a it's such a core part of the media business. That's going to be really important. And I guess so. Looking not just into Q4 but beyond that, how have these sort of changes to the digital audience shifting and becoming that much bigger, and then that move to e-commerce as well, how has that sort of impacted your broader strategy for NewsUK?
I suppose, I mean, it's really just highlighted the importance of diversification and agility, that you have to adapt quickly to changes in audience behaviours and key trends. So I suppose an example of this that we've got is, we know that digital audio is on the rise, like podcasts in particular for us at the Times, and we've seen podcasts listening over the last year increase by 76%, which is great. And we've launched a new podcast called Stories of Our Times, and we've launched a Times radio channel. So we've done a lot in terms of moving into this space, there's more people of, you know, turning to audio to consume their, you know, consume their content. And we've also launched Octave Audio in partnership with Bauer as a new digital audio ad platform as well. So that's really one reason. One, you know, firstly is around the importance of diversification and agility, but also secondly, and I know I keep on harping back to this point, but the fact that people were turning to trusted news stories during that pandemic, it really highlighted to us like the positive emotional connection that our audiences have with our brands. So it's, you know, we've strategically now made it our mission at NewsUK to make brands matter through emotional connections, to ensure that everything that we're doing is really linked to that mission and purpose.
Okay. And I guess talking about, so the pandemic is one issue that we face, which brands have had to navigate. But I mean, this year hasn't been without other challenges as well. You know, controversial topics such as the Black Lives Matter movement. There was the big Facebook boycott a couple of months ago now. I guess talk me through a little bit how news approaches these, I guess, riskier or potentially unbrand safe controversial topics, and how do you approach them for advertisers?
Yes, so I mean, the nature of a news publisher is that we report on all news content, whether that's breaking, it's positive, it's negative, it's scandalous, it could be uplifting. But what everyone's got to remember is our content is carefully curated and we're IPSO regulated as well. So we do take brand safety very, very seriously at NewsUK. And for digital, we have two levels of brand safety. So firstly, the one that is set by our editorial team. So if we have, like, we're covering a, you know, breaking news topic, so it could be around like a terrorist attack or something like that, the first thing that we do is we ensure that there are no ads like on that page. We remove all ads from the page, so you know, no brands are advertising around that anyway. So that's first and foremost. Anything that's deemed to be unbrand safe by editorial team, all ads are removed from the page. But then this is where it's important now to make the distinction between what about brand safety and brand suitability. And I know that these are words that get bandied around a lot. So you know, as I said, we won't run advertising on anything that we deem that to be hard-hitting news and not brand safe. But we apply like a second layer around the brand suitability bit. So we use context control, like your product. So our content is analysed to identify like the emotions and sentiments. So it's not just about obviously just blocking a keyword. So it allows us to customise like what is different for each brand. Like, because I think what we've got to remember here is there really is no one size fits all. Like what one brand deems to be unbrand safe, another brand might want to be associated with. So it's really difficult. So I think, but it's really important not to look at just a keyword. It's really important to look at the context in which that is, you know, that is displayed and the sentiment of that article. So it really does depend. I mean, also, you know, you're thinking about, you know, around hard-hitting news or something that could, you know, incite like a, you know, an emotional reaction of potentially like sadness. But that's not necessarily always a bad thing. Like we've seen, you know, charities often advertise around that type of content. So it's just really giving the example that there is no real one-size-fits-all approach, but it's really important to customize it for the advertiser.
No, of course. So I guess bringing a couple of those elements together. So you've got the context control tool, which I guess is important to help move away from keywords, and particularly around those, I guess, more controversial issues. Both of them have, you know, positive and negative outcomes to it. And then I guess the third thing that you have mentioned is emotion, and you sort of mentioned that earlier on as well. I mean, can you talk me through a little bit of the importance of emotion for the Times and the Sun and I guess the NewsUK brand, and sort of how you're approaching that?
Okay, so emotion is really important to us. So if we just think about it, the sheer volume of ads that we're exposed to each day is absolutely overwhelming. And as a consequence of that, it can be really difficult for brands to get people to take, you know, to pay attention and take notice of their ads. but we see that there's a shortcut through this, and that shortcut is through emotion. So 95% of our brain's processing is automatic, instinctive, and emotional. And at NewsUK, we've spent years like cultivating this relationship with our audience, and we know how to create content that resonates emotionally with them. And what we've done recently is invested in the tools that enable us to do this. So we've invested in the tools that track emotional engagement and to give brands insights to, to basically supercharge their campaigns by targeting them in the right emotional context. And we've built our own content analytics engine, and we take data from a number of different sources. So we look at, we do emoticon polls on the Sun, so where we have like little emoticons, so how does this article make you feel? We have comments underneath our articles, and especially on the Times, our subscribers get really involved in terms of, I mean, if you're a Times subscriber and you haven't read the comments, you're missing out. Like, they're just as good as the news story itself. And we also run surveys. We have Admantic's contextual categorization. So we combine all of this data to establish how our audience is feeling, and then we can put that all together and we can target based on emotions. So, to put it basically, it means that we can target, we now offer segments based on emotion. So a brand can target a happy segment, or an informed segment, or an in the mood to spend segment, like totally dependent on what they want to achieve. And it's really important for us moving forward. Well, emotion's really important to us moving forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, emotion is such a key trigger in any sort of marketing brief, like, especially if you look at just even the luxury car category, feelings of pride and sort of really plays in a lot. So that's really powerful. Okay, so talk me through a little bit more about, so you've got these new, I guess, new sort of emotional segments that you're rolling out. Typically, how does NewsUK roll out products to market? Are you able to talk through that process a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that we look at when we're rolling out a product, roll out a product to market. So, firstly, we look at like what's happening in the market in terms of, in terms of trends, emerging platforms. We always are looking at like, well, what are our advertisers challenged with? But most importantly, and I think the foundation of everything is like the behaviour of our readers. What are they looking at? How is that changing? That's really, really important to us. So all of that information is all absorbed from all of those different touch points. And, in terms of how we plan it, we work to a quarterly innovation cycle. So pre this situation that we're in, where we're having to work remotely at the moment, we used to run quarterly offsite and we brainstorm and we prioritize. Obviously that has to be done remotely now, but the principles remain the same. And we also do things with other departments as well within NewsUK. So it's not just commercial who's necessarily always coming up with the ideas for product innovations. We've recently run a hackathon with technology, where we presented to our technology team what are our challenges in commercial, and they're giving them the ability to come up with, to spend a day just coming up with some ideas. We also, I think there's an appreciation as well that you need to have, is that good ideas can come from anywhere. But you need to give people a way in which they're comfortable to channel those ideas. So we also have like a product council. So what the product council does is people have got the ability to come to that product council, where you've got like key stakeholders to present ideas in terms of like product innovations. So it could be some, a salesperson, coming up with like a great idea, but it's important to put a process in place to innovate and come up with ideas where people feel comfortable like presenting those ideas to like key stakeholders. So I suppose in answer to your question, it's like multiple things that we look at, but it's really important to have a framework in which you do it, but that isn't too restrictive.
No, of course. Well, and I assume that would cover both sort of editorially led new products. So I guess like the Octave idea, where you've expanded into audio a lot, along with some of advertising centric products like the Shop with Style or something along those lines, which would okay, no, that's interesting. I guess looking at sort of, this year, and especially to the comment you mentioned earlier, where your digital has really advanced, significantly farther this year than I guess what it has done in previous years. I mean, what's sort of what is News doing now? And I guess almost from a campaign perspective, what campaigns are you running now that you probably wouldn't have been running 12 months ago, given, I guess, what's changed this year?
Yeah, so I think going back to like what we're doing around emotional targeting, so that's new for us. I mean, we have run campaigns around, we've run campaigns before around emotion, but it's always been inferred emotion, like based on the content and the context in which that's appearing. So, but what this is really doing is taking it to the next level. And I know I've mentioned it a few times, but I think it's because we really believe that this is really important and a really, really great way to engage with audiences. I mean, we also at the same time, before we even determined that we were going to do this, we did run some like quite robust research that looked at, we analysed thousands of lines of campaign data that uncovered that interaction with ads was twice as likely when emotive ads were placed in an uplifting content. So it's really important to us, like moving forward, and we've actually just we've just sold one of the first campaigns that's targeting emotion just this week, which is great, and I think it's just something that we're rolling out to market now. So we'll be presenting back like our findings, what's been happening with that as time goes on, but we're right at the cusp of just doing it now.
Or I guess, looking to sort of to wrap it up a little bit then. So what, I guess, is NewsUK doing? What are the main things you're doing to future-proof yourself going into 2021?
Okay, so I mean, a lot of this I mentioned before, it's all around like following like the behaviour of our audience. So we recently conducted a piece of work based around like the consumer of the future, like the consumer of our products in the future. So it's saying, well, actually, how are they consuming content in 5 years' time? What does it look like? For example, increase in technology, the rise of voice technology and the connected home. Like, how is this all going to impact how people are reading or listening to news? So it's really important to follow changes in your audience's behaviour in terms of how are they going to be and how we're going to be in the future. And then I suppose the advertising products fit around how you engage with that audience. But first and foremost, you have to look at the behaviour of our audience. So if it's like be it reading, listening, or watching the news, and adapt our products accordingly. So this is evident in like new products that we've launched, recently, as have been born out of that trend in terms of changes in our audience's behaviour. But also it's important to recognise that as we're a large news organisation, but we can't stand still. We have to be agile and we have to evolve. That's so important. That's so important for us strategically as a business. And I think that's something that we do very well. So, for example, we're one of the founding members of the Ozone Project. Last year, we launched The Fifth, which is an influencer marketing agency. Like I mentioned it before, but we've also recently launched Octave Audio in partnership with Bauer as a new digital audio platform. I mean, all of this, I think, to summarise, I suppose, how we're future-proofing ourselves is we're future-proofing ourselves really by not standing still and like evolving and adjusting with changes in the market and our audiences.
No, absolutely. So with the demise of the third-party cookie, I guess there's going to be so much more of an importance and strategic importance, especially with first-party data. Are you able to talk through a little bit of what NewsUK's approach is, and are you able to comment on any of that?
Oh yes, I think, we believe in 18 months with the death of third-party cookies and increasing challenges around data compliance and consent. Advertisers will be looking for new ways to essentially just reach their target audiences. So, what we've spoken about before is context might be one way of doing it, but also leveraging first-party data might be another. And I suppose we're future-proofing ourselves by advancing our capabilities in these areas. So our aim and vision really is to truly be a one-stop shop for advertisers moving forward, providing insights, targeting and analysis.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Lou. That's been really interesting hearing about NewsUK and what you guys are doing next year, how you've handled this year and sort of the challenges. For everybody else listening in from home, please hang around for our closing, which will be done by Nick Morley and Lisa Uschneider, the IAS CEO and EMEA MD. There will be a survey afterwards. Please don't forget to fill that out. And I hope you found this helpful and interesting.